Fred was filled with anger. Now it was confirmed that his wife Lilia was in a relationship with another man. He had long ago noticed changes in her. She began to take better care of herself, visiting the beautician more often and dressing more provocatively. But he did not want to believe that his beloved Lilia could be unfaithful. Driven by his suspicions, Fred decided one day to follow his wife. He left work early and discreetly followed her to her workplace. Leaving the building, he saw Lilia getting into someone else's car, an expensive one. Determined to get to the bottom of it, he followed them to an upscale apartment complex. Unfortunately, he was unable to enter the premises, but he witnessed a depressing sight. His wife was passionately kissing an unknown man in the courtyard. Feeling betrayed and not knowing what to do next, Fred sat in the car for some time after they fled into the building. Eventually, he started the engine and drove home, still digesting the shocking revelation. For the moment, he decided to remain silent about what he had witnessed. Fred held a respected position and was making a good living at his company. However, it was obvious that this was not enough for Lilia. She craved luxury, dreaming of private planes and yachts. Fred couldn't help but wonder if her new lover could provide her with all that. To gather more information before meeting his wife, Fred decided to find out as much as he could about this man. He managed to write down the license plate number of the car, although he feared that it might not be enough. He even thought of hiring a private detective. He approached an acquaintance who worked for the police and explained his predicament. "Tell me the number," Steve suggested. "Let's get the owner's name and look him up on the internet. You can find anyone these days with just a few clicks. If we don't find anything, I can recommend a good detective." The next day, Fred got the name he was looking for. Anticipating his lunch break, he closed his office door to ensure privacy and typed the man's name into the search engine. Surprisingly, his friend's advice proved to be correct. The information was readily available. Within minutes, Fred learned that his wife's lover owned his own company in the construction industry. In addition, he found out that the man has long been divorced and in one of the online interviews stated his desire to have a family, especially children. Now Fred finally understood the reasons for his wife's behavior. She stopped hiding that she was dating another because she planned to leave him soon. Fred could not accept this. His male pride rebelled against such humiliation. In his opinion, Lilia did not want to have children. She said that they should wait, that she wanted to focus on herself and was afraid of ruining her figure. And yet she had apparently agreed to have a child. Fred rummaged around in his head, looking for a way to get back at his wife. He quickly came up with a plan. The best way to get back at her would be to have an affair of his own. And he knew who would fit the role: Stephanie, his wife's best friend. Fred and Lily had been married for 5 years, and in that time he had gotten to know Stephanie well. Although they both knew she had feelings for him, acting directly with Stephanie would be risky. Fortunately, Lilia's birthday was only a few weeks away. Fred called Stephanie and suggested they meet that same evening, under the pretext that he needed her help to surprise his wife. Stephanie immediately agreed. "What are you planning?" asked Stephanie as they sat down in the cafe. "Are you throwing a special party or planning a special gift? Do you know that Lilia is cheating on me?" Fred asked Vasily bluntly. "What?" Looked at him surprised Stephanie. "No, of course not. You must be mistaken about something. Lilia would never cheat on you. She loves you. Stephanie, there's no need to defend her. Lilia and I don't have feelings for each other anymore. We just live together out of habit. I realized a long time ago that I made a big mistake and should have chosen you over her." Stephanie blushed visibly. "But you chose her," she said firmly. "You're married, and I." Fred walked over and gently placed a hand on her shoulder, pulling her closer. "Listen," he whispered. "We have a chance to change everything and be happy together." Stephanie pulled away, standing up in anger. "Is that why you called me here?" she exclaimed. "How could you even think that I—" She shook her head, unable to continue. "I'm sorry, Stephanie," Fred apologized, running his hand over his face. "Sometimes I act like a real rascal. I'm worried about Lilia wanting to leave. It makes me behave inadequately. I didn't mean to involve you. Please don't say anything to her." Stephanie crouched on the edge of the couch, mulling over his words. All right, she replied reluctantly. Are you sure Lilia is cheating on you? No, he answered. It's just that she's been distant lately. I don't know what else to think. Stephanie offered her advice. I think you should do something romantic for her. Have a candlelight dinner. Have a heart-to-heart talk. It might help you both get closer again. Fred hesitated. Look, Stephanie, you may be right, but I'm not good at opening up and talking. Instead, I'll throw a special dinner for Lily on her birthday. I'll buy her an expensive gift, like diamond earrings or a bracelet. But I need your help talking. Maybe you'll agree to join us next week so we can all talk together. Stephanie agreed cautiously, not knowing how to proceed. Fred had a plan. For a whole week, he had been persuading Lilia to spend the evening at home, but she had steadfastly refused, offering no excuses. This only strengthened his suspicion that she was planning to leave him soon. He wondered why she hadn't already done so. He hadn't deluded himself into thinking he could save their relationship, and he hadn't tried. His only goal was revenge. His plan was devious yet simple. Knowing that neither his wife nor her friend liked alcohol very much, all he needed to do was to get them both intoxicated. On Saturday evening, they finally gathered all together in the apartment. Fred had prepared carefully, ordering food from his wife's favorite restaurant and making sure there was plenty of wine at home. He immediately offered everyone a drink to help relax and make the conversation smoother. After a couple hours, both girls were already feeling drowsy, which Fred expected. He sent them to bed and began to put the apartment in order before getting down to the action. With great care, Fred moved his wife to the couch in the living room. He put a pillow under her head and even covered her. He then carried Stephanie into the bedroom and gently placed her in the marital bed, crouching down beside him. Now all he had to do was wait for morning. As planned, in the morning Fred was awakened by his wife's loud screaming. With a heroic effort of will, he suppressed a smile and adopted a confused expression on his face. What happened? He asked, scrunching up his nose as if he had a headache. Why are you yelling like that? Are you out of your mind or something? Shouted Lilia. Did you get so drunk last night that you mistook us for Stephanie? Why are you sleeping in the same bed? Ah, Fred smirked lazily. Well, you see, we had a thing last night. Turns out Stephanie. He smiled playfully, leaving the sentence unfinished. At that moment, Stephanie woke up, looking around frightened. She pressed her hand to her forehead, clearly suffering from a severe headache. What am I doing here? She asked cautiously. Don't you remember? Fred pretended to be puzzled. I just can't understand how one could forget something like that. Lilia studied her husband intently, a glimmer of understanding appearing in her eyes. So you wanted to get back at me, didn't you? She asked. You decided to hurt me? Well, I'll tell you, it didn't work out. I want you both out of this room immediately. I don't care what happened here. I don't care what you have to say. I'm gonna pack my things and I'm gonna leave. And I hope I never have to see either of you again, she stated, turning to her friend. And I'll see you in court. Stephanie quickly got out of bed, gathered her things, and disappeared into the bathroom. Fred, meanwhile, sat lazily in the kitchen, sipping his coffee and feeling a sense of satisfaction. He had managed to foil his wife's plans. You tricked me. Stephanie greeted him as she entered the kitchen. Tricked me, he marveled. You've been in love with me for a long time. And here, I have a present for you. Tell me the truth, she begged. Did anything happen between us? Did you make it all up? I told the truth, Fred replied. I wouldn't joke about such things. Stephanie looked at him hatefully and then promptly left the apartment. Soon Lilia left as well. At first, Fred was pleased with the way things had turned out. However, every day he felt more and more lonely. He realized that he was no longer as young and attractive to the opposite sex as he had thought before. He longed for the warmth and comfort of home, for someone to accept him. Unfortunately, his wife filed for divorce and showed no signs of returning. Fred began to think about Stephanie more and more often. Why had he chosen perky Lilia over Stephanie, who was homemaker, kind, and stunningly beautiful? For so many years, she had secretly loved him, and he. Fred tried to call her, but Stephanie ignored his calls. A month after his wife's departure, Fred, almost driven to despair, made the decision to go to Stephanie. He was unbearable to live without her for a day. However, she did not open the door to him and even threatened to call the police. Defeated, Fred left, but he was not going to give up. The next day, he waited for her near her workplace with a bouquet of flowers. Stephanie raised her eyebrows in surprise, but walked on by. Another day passed, and he invited her to a cafe, but she refused. For a whole week, Fred waited patiently for her after work. Finally, his persistence broke through and Stephanie approached him. "What do you want?" she asked. "Why are you following me?" "I miss you," Fred admitted. "I feel lost without you. I've been such a fool. All these years I should have been with you instead of choosing Lilia. Stephanie, please, just a few more weeks, and we will be divorced, and I will be a free man. Then we can." "No, we won't," Stephanie interrupted. "I don't believe you anymore. You are deceitful and despicable. I regret spending so much time admiring you." With those words, she walked past him, continuing on her way. Fred never lost his determination to win her over. Despite her constant refusals, he persisted in meeting her after work, hoping to attract her attention. He thought that perhaps she doubted his sincerity because of their stormy past. Fred was determined to prove his devotion to her. To prove the seriousness of his intentions, he bought a ring. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, impeccably dressed in a suit and with a bouquet in his hands, he appeared on the doorstep of her house. Standing in the yard, he pondered how best to propose and carefully chose words to convince Stephanie to accept his love. Suddenly, the door opened and a radiant Stephanie stood before him. Fred's spirits lifted when she saw him through the window. He believed that she understood his intentions and expected her to come out and hug him. However, Stephanie did not even acknowledge his presence. Instead, she rushed over to the man getting out of the parked car, a look of joy on her face. He picked her up in his arms, spun her around, and lowering her to the ground, kissed her passionately. Gasping, Stephanie finally spoke, asking about her partner's next business trip. The man replied that it would be in 2 months at the earliest, and expressed his desire to marry her in that time. They laughed together, happy about their plans for the future, and decided to go home. Dejected, Fred crept to the car, trying not to attract attention. The sight of the couple absorbed in love showed that he was indifferent to them. They clung tightly to each other, oblivious to the world around them, as if afraid of even the slightest separation. Left alone, Fred watched them, absorbed in introspection. He wondered why his own life had failed and why he considered himself unworthy of happiness.